Hello and welcome to the Celtic Down Under Tuesday Crew podcast. I'm your host for tonight, Stephen, and I'm delighted to be joined by the very cream of the Celtic podcasting crop, Gav, Steve, and Mac. Now, the title of the episode of tonight's podcast is Champions Again because ... So I'm going to go to each of you guys to fill in the end of the sentence in the style of Ange in his post-title speech on Saturday. So I'll go to you first, Mac. So champions again because...
I'm going to say one that's a bit out of the box. I was going to say because of our imagination. So I think the fact that we are starting to look into other markets, the fact that we brought Ange to be the Celtic coach or manager in the first place, and I think that's a really smart thing to do, and something that we should continue to do is to continue to look outside the box and look around the world and what kind of managers or potential talent are out there, and can we bring them in, and can they contribute and make us stronger? And you also notice our imagination with the way that we're recruiting now, looking into markets that maybe we wouldn't have looked into in the past, with Japan and South Korea and the Middle East and Asia, really, and even starting to bring in Argentinian players as well. Although Bernabé is still a bit, we don't know how he's going to go in the end. But I think looking into these markets is intelligent, and I think that's helped contribute to our win. I thought I've said that because I knew it might be a bit different to some of the other answers we'll get. So anyway, let's hear from the others.
No, that's a good answer. Thinking outside the box. That's why we're champions again. So, Gav, I'll go to you next. Champions again because...
Well, my answer is much more inside the box. I would say champions again because in the manager's seat sits a giant, a man of authority, ambition, and intellect, with a singular focus on victory through an entertaining style of play in which he has an unshakable belief.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that one. Yeah, definitely the Ange being the man he is certainly a huge amount to do with it. So, Steve, for you, champions again because...
You're muted.
I think you're muted, Steve.
No, you're not muted, but... Steve's having audio issues. I think he needs to set up his microphone correctly. Champions again, right, because we're on top of the technology.
Because we never stop setting up the technology. I'm just happy nobody said champions again because we never stop, because that would be just such a cliche.
Is that what you were about to say, Steve?
No, that was nothing to do with me. No.
What's your answer then?
Your answer, Stephen?
Well, I was just going to say it's pretty much the same as Gav. Champions again because the guy we have as manager is just a different level to anything else in the country. A guy who just seems to have the answer to all the questions, and a guy who just knows the right thing to say at exactly the right time to get everybody going. I mean, his after-match speech on Saturday had them all on strings there. He was like a politician. It was excellent. It really was, and we're just so fortunate to have him. Hopefully it goes on for a long time yet. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit later on. Steve, are you with us yet?
Possibly. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we have you loud and clear. Mate, champions again because
we never stop. No, I'm joking. Because we scored more goals than anybody else, and we conceded fewer than anybody else. So 114 goals for the season, breaking long-held records, and conceding, 34 goals, which is, pretty phenomenal. So best at both ends of the park, best in the middle too.
Steve, I don't know if you're using a different microphone than usual, but your sound is quite muffled.
Okay.
But better to hear something than nothing.
I'll try and fix it while you guys carry on.
Yeah, 114 goals for the season. I think that's something definitely worth touching on. It's a record, a post-war record for the Scottish League. Not something we've heard much of in the Scottish media, even although it is a record, but a remarkable achievement, Mac, isn't it, to score that many goals?
Yeah, it's fantastic. To score, it's not easy to do that, and to beat a record like that from that far back was post-war record. So I think one thing I really like about our team is we score from all over the park. Although Kyogo is scoring so many goals this year, we also see other players coming in and putting in a couple of goals as well over the park. So Jota has scored a number of goals. We've had a change of striker in Giakoumakis, but O's come in and he's starting to score goals as well and feeling more comfortable in his position. So it is one thing we saw from Ange's team from early on, even when he was a coach of the Socceroos, was people would be bringing in goals from all over the place. So long may that continue. And when we see him playing at the levels that we saw on the weekend and the speed that they were playing, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. I mean, at the end of the day, Gav, goals are what football's all about. So the more we score, the better.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how my friend who lives here in Malaysia, who's a former Socceroo, guy called Scott Olorenshaw, he pulled me aside at the time when Ange was mentioned for the job, or, maybe, it all happened quite quickly. I think once his name was mentioned, but, he was telling me it's just all out attack. He never stops. The throw-ins are taken so quickly, and it's, we're going to score one more than you sort of approach. He's not too fussed about defense. He doesn't build from the defense. He builds from scoring goals. And, that got my juices flowing, if you pardon the expression. But, it made me so excited to see what he was going to do with Celtic. And it's been an absolute joy ever since he was appointed. Just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome along to everyone joining us in the YouTube live, and welcome along to anyone in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you like what you hear, or even if you don't like what you hear, hit the like button anyway and give us all a hand. We were having problems last week with some of our audio with the podcast apps. So if you're struggling to download into any of your podcast apps, then you might have to catch this episode on the YouTube channel. So please reach out to us if you are having issues, and we'll try to get it fixed as quickly as we can. So moving on to the match itself on Saturday, the Celtic's now annual title party. I just want to talk a bit about, firstly, the pre-match. And we'll start talking about with the pre-match tifo, the full stadium tifo that was organised between the Green Brigade, the North Curve and the boys. Now, to me, that it was something really exceptional. It was an incredible sight that greeted the players when they came out the tunnel. Certainly up there with the best tifos I've seen from the club's fans, and up there with anything I've seen from any club's fans, to be honest. And the amount of work that goes into that is incredible. So, Steve, what was your impression of the tifo?
Oh, I loved it. So, it just makes me laugh, when we look at the other side of the city when they do it, and we're all left guessing, what was that? Was it a club crest? Was it Broxy the bear? Was it, I'll name that picture in one. Whereas ours was crystal clear, beautiful, really well put together, and the effort these guys put in, it's unbelievable, including getting Tom Boyd involved in the act by the look of some of the tweets that came out during the week as well. So yeah, kudos to those groups, them collaborating together to make it happen. Really fantastic spectacle.
Yeah, Gav, it's almost like an art installation, isn't it? I mean, it's so complex, and the amount of planning to have. It's almost like putting a separate pixel on every seat, the amount of planning that goes in ahead. It's just an incredible thing to see. to see it all coming together. Very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not almost like art. It is art. I mean, it's one thing to spell words. Any old organization that wants to do a huge tifo can spell words, but the quality of the imagery, at either end was just so impressive. I mean, it was instantly recognizable. Those pictures. You know who those guys are. Obviously huge legends of the club. Willie Maley, as long-time viewers of this podcast know, close personal friend of my great-grandfather. It was great to see him up there as well, because sometimes you sort of get the impression he does get a lot of reverence, but to have chosen those two giants at either end of the stadium was really something. I thought it looked absolutely amazing. I wish the instruction had to come, please stuff this under your backside as soon as the tifo is complete. And you saw me commenting in the group, like, is that made out of recycled plastic, all that stuff? How green are the brigade? Because like they're probably still flying about the east end of Glasgow and choking any wildlife turtles that happen to be, walking through the Calton.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was all biodegradable fully.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm absolutely 100% sure. I'll take that to the bank, Gav. Yeah, Mac, what did you think of the tifo? Were you impressed?
I was, very impressed, not just by the tifo, but the whole way that the day was set up. I think if you watch it as an outsider, you just see a club that it was almost a show of power from us. Having this beautiful sunny day, Martin O'Neill bringing in the trophy person who's succeeded and done great things with the club, and then just everyone, a lot of former players there at the match, dressed beautifully in their Celtic ties and suits, and just everyone just having a really good time. It was a really great day, one, and great to have that. Many seasons we've had these days, so fantastic.
Yeah, Steve, it was great to see Martin O'Neill carrying the trophy up the Celtic way, and he just looked so happy to be there. It was a really nice moment.
Yeah, no, he's he's a character. He's clearly got the club the absolute heart of what he does. Very devoted to the club and the club's whole way of being. And it kind of made me think, actually, and Ange clearly looks to previous managers, and whether he gets advice or he just bounces ideas off them, or maybe even just uses them just as a an informal channel. But Ange, looking at the way Martin O'Neill is revered at the club, I think would hopefully make him think, yeah, this could be me in a few years' time. If I stick around, if I deliver continued success to the club, that could be, me as an older statesman, at some point in the future.
Yeah, well, let's hope that comes into it, Steve. Gav, if I'm not wrong, Martin O'Neill's another old friend of yours from Belfast. Am I right in saying that?
Not an old friend, but we went to the same school. And
I knew there was the connection somewhere.
Yeah. And so did Eamon Holmes, who's also in the news quite a lot at the moment. I don't know if you're staying on top of British and light entertainment scandals, but Eamon is also getting his tuppence worth in kicking Schofield when he's down.
Schofield's been on top of too much light entertainment, to be honest. Yeah, just getting back to Martin O'Neill. He's been a big success at a lot of different clubs, but it's great to see that he's clearly Celtic are still in his heart. Yeah, that was nice to see. So it was a great moment, and I think it sort of set the tone for the whole day really well.
That's a good point that Steve makes, though, is that we talked about managers before and how hell hath no fury, like a Celtic fan base scorned. So ex-managers who we still hold close to our hearts, are those that either because of the passage of time, all sins are washed away, or they manage to leave in such a positive way and didn't leave us feeling jilted. I hope Ange sees through what he says he came here to do, because he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't made us a force in Europe and a team that we expect to be there every year and make an impact. So fingers crossed that he does look at Martin O'Neill carrying the trophy and thinks exactly what Steve said, is that, Ange is a very sensible man, and he does, again, as Steve said, look at former managers, and he knows he's standing on the shoulders of giants in that regard. But he definitely wants to be remembered as fondly as possible. So I just want to echo those sentiments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Just touching quickly on the game itself. Obviously, Celtic were back to top form. 5-0 win over Aberdeen, who really didn't land a glove on us. 2 from Kyogo, 2 from O, and a header from Carl Starfelt. Do you think it was just a case of the occasion, Mac, that led to the lift in form, or was it the inclusion of any particular personnel that lifted the intensity in the team?
I think that a lot of our lack of form in the last few weeks has been pretty intentional from Ange. I think that he wants those players that are on the fringe to start coming together, and I think he knows that if you bring a lot of players in at once, it's going to play with the team quite a lot. But I think sometimes creating those sort of challenges is good for the team. One thing I've heard Ange say before is he doesn't like people getting too comfortable in their position. He doesn't like them feeling like, everything's too easy, because it's that time when you're going to lose. And maybe we've lost a couple of matches in the last couple of weeks, but it's about how do we play this last week, and how do we play in the final. That's the key. Are we going to win silverware? Are we getting better ahead of playing in Europe next year? And I think there's some benefits to doing it. I think bringing in those new players, you start to get an idea of how they go under pressure. I think the players that are there, players like Starfelt, one thing I noticed about him was he was starting to take ownership over the defense and start talking to people in the defense. You felt like he was the strong one there. At one point in one of the games, I saw him, the attacker came at him and he came straight back. The attacker was pushing the attacker backwards. Those are good signs. I feel like those players will have progressed having played in those challenging situations. So I think that was the case. I think bringing in some of the players that are there regularly, people started back bringing Kyogo back into the match. I think bringing Greg Taylor back in, bringing AJ in, Alistair Johnson, all those additions made a huge difference.
Yeah, Steve, he brought in Iwata again and left Kobayashi out the team. You'd think that would be the team or the way the defence would line up anyway for the cup final. And I think Iwata played quite well. Do you think that was down to both the first choice fullbacks being back on the field?
Yeah, I think it makes a difference. To echo what Max said, if you look at some of those games during junk time, as Ange called it, where there's wholesale change, you're talking about, disrupting the centre-back pairing, changing the full-backs on both sides. There's nothing really solid, to fix the team to, and that's a hell of a change, really. It's not like we're slotting in Bernabei for GT on a one-off game, or we're slotting in Ralston instead of AJ. That's wholesale change right across the back, including goalkeeper for the Hibs game. So a wholesale change. I think having the kind of pillars of the two, fullbacks that we've seen all season in Taylor and AJ, makes a massive difference. It really does. I thought Iwata, I mean, don't get me wrong, he wasn't under a huge amount of pressure at any point in time. Wasn't certainly under any sustained pressure at any point in time. But I think he looked solid enough. He's clearly a very tidy footballer, and he clearly gives us options coming out from, the back. So, obviously, we all can't wait till CCV's back. But I think it works. Probably works in most games. If we have other kind of more solid members of the defence present, I think it could work. In terms of the weekend, obviously we'll come on to the weekend in a moment. I'm a bit worried as to whether Alistair Johnston will be fit enough. I don't know if anyone's seen any news on that over the course of the last few days.
But the only thing I seen was multiple sources saying that Ange was fairly upbeat about his chances of playing, and he didn't expect him to last the 90 minutes on Saturday anyway. So it was probably a little bit of a knock, coupled with a little bit of a just taking him off anyway to rest him. Yeah, but I would echo your sentiments. We really need him. We really need Alistair Johnston. He was absolutely brilliant. I thought the difference was noticeable.
And I mean, just to take that to its logical conclusion, if it's not Alistair Johnston at the weekend, Ralston's a solid enough backup, but it's then Ralston coming in with a new player playing inside of him at the centre-back pairing. And I think that's where the breakdown really happens. It's not necessarily swapping one in for another. I don't think our team, or I think our team is more resilient than, just seeing the impact of one player coming in for another and seeing the defence fall over. It's where you start breaking that down right across the back line. So if it's Ralston and Iwata inside them, you start to think, that's where, you're likely to see some gaps emerge or some lack of communication or lack of understanding. That would be the concern, really.
Yeah, and Gav, obviously Dyson Maeda was suspended after his red card at Easter Road last week. So Jota was on the left and Abada on the right. Abada didn't finish the game coming up. Not sure what the nature of his injury was, but I did see him on the bench with an ice pack. Do you think Maeda comes back into the team for the final, assuming Abada's fit, or will he stick with Jota and Abada?
Well, who knows? I mean, he seems to favour Maeda, all things being equal. So, well, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I was just glad that the team sort of showed that they were in the zone because there was something to play for, not just the cup final coming up, but it's trophy day. It's a big celebration. There was enough reasons for them to be up for that game that were absent from the previous few. So, I was never that anxious about the way those results were going, and we've almost forgotten about it now. I'm not saying I told you so, but I was saying, look, this will all be forgotten very soon. I think Steve, I was thinking about this the last time we did one of these, and Steve was saying, "Oh, I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that," and I was like, don't worry. And I was thinking, I try not to be anxious in life. I try and remove anxiety where possible. Some people quite, thrive off it. I wonder whether Steve, I'm worried about Alistair Johnston, kind of likes a sense of concern. Am I psychoanalyzing you incorrectly, Steve?
No, you're bang on, Gav. I'm an anxious person, No, but I actually genuinely was worried. I think it's harder than people think to kick habits, So if we had got into the habit of being a bit sloppy around our play, not necessarily closing down, and I know we focused on the defence last week, but the reality is Maeda's defending from the front was poor. The midfield was, the midfield against Rangers, frankly, was shockingly bad, and that was pretty much our first choice. and I worry that becomes pattern, So I must admit, I was very pleasantly surprised at the weekend, because clearly either rockets went up backsides or the team just decided, we really need to do this. And it's good to see, it's clearly good to see. And it's reassuring. It set all my anxiety, to one side. Thanks, Gav.
I imagine there were some words from Ange before the game, that struck a chord with the players. You could imagine he would have said some things that make you walk out there feeling like a lion, not a squirrel, to reference a previous episode.
I'm not sure if I'm buying the whole the players just decided to turn up because of the occasion. I think the addition of the two fullbacks makes a huge difference.
Well, that of course. As well.
Ange's system absolutely depends on having two functioning fullbacks, and we haven't had that for a number of weeks now. So, Steve, I think we're right to be not concerned, but we're right to keep an eye on whether Alistair Johnston's fit for the final. And you've seen on the other side, Greg Taylor, he's passing to Kyogo for the first goal, which is always the key goal in games like this. Was outstanding. It was a great pass, and that's what Greg Taylor's brought to the team this year. He's been absolutely excellent in that role, and when he's not there, Bernabé is just not capable of fulfilling that role. So we might draw a line under the game itself and move on maybe to the post-match celebrations. There was wholesome scenes aplenty on the pitch with the players and their families taking the chance to kick back, relax, walk around the pitch and interact with the crowd a bit. Really nice to see. And something I think the club is doing really well these days. I know we win the title a lot. We get a lot of practice at it, but Mac, it's a really nice way to round off the league, seeing the players and their families all celebrating together, isn't it?
I think, I agree. I think it's fantastic, and I think having all the family there, we've got a mixture of different players. So we have players from Scotland, but we've also got players from all around the world, and it's a big challenge for families to come to another part of the world to live. So, and the partners and their children. So it's a day to celebrate. Once the game's finished and we've won the game, it's a time to celebrate all those sacrifices and the players, not just the players, the support staff, our coaching staff, all those families, just to take in the moment of playing for a team like Celtic and enjoy that huge crowd that we have and to everyone interact together. I think it's really great to see, and it's something those players will take with them. Not every club does that.
Yeah, so some great scenes, Steve. For me, the highlight of it was Ange Postecoglou going even higher up in my estimation, being 57 years old and having two kids that age. How does he do
it? Don't we all, Stephen? Don't we all have,
I'm sorry, that would be the end of me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, those days are by for me as well. But I mean, it's pretty wholesome. You see the kids, and to Mac's point, a lot of these players, I know we think they live a very fortunate life. They're paid, big sums of money to do stuff that we would only dream of. But the reality is they give up a lot as well. They sacrifice a lot. Their work life is very concentrated, over periods, and quite a lot of change and schooling and whatnot. So it's nice to see, us recognise that, give back to the club and obviously the broader community. And I mean, let's be honest. I know we'll talk about Ange in a moment, but the reality is, Ange gets the club. He knows, what we're founded on. He knows our principles and, the history of the club and the foundations of it, etc. And, fundamentally, community is very much at the heart of that, as we saw later in the day, when there were celebrations aplenty. Yeah.
Yeah, and Gav, I noticed Kyogo getting interviewed. He attempted a couple of words in English, and it wasn't much, but I think it was significant, just to show that these guys are really attempting to integrate with the squad. And you know, when he first arrived, Kyogo couldn't speak a word of English, but he's obviously making some progress there.
Yeah, I felt a bit sorry for him. I didn't notice his loved ones of any description coming near him. Everybody else was off with their families and stuff, and he was left to lug the trophy around with his wee arms. It seemed to exhaust him. Maybe that's where his injury came from. I don't know. But what other highlights were there? It was nice to see Jacinta on the pitch in a pair of snugly fitting jeans, taking photographs of the Starfelts. That was a nice moment. I don't know if you saw somebody bumped into the Starfelt mum and dad in Lisbon airport.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about how thrilled they were that their son played for this wonderful club. So then that was them on the pitch, the same people. So that all checked out. Yeah, Ange was able to lift both his kids as well, one in each arm, which is pretty impressive. He's got some guns on him, clearly. Yeah, so it is great, as Steve says, for families and partners and loved ones to share in the moment. Kind of, you know, brings them into the collective. It's not just daddy's off doing his job and getting all the glory, you know. So that's very nice to see. That's not what your question was. What was your question? Kyogo speaking English. I didn't see that.
Speaking English.
I'd quite like to see somebody from our side learning a bit of Japanese instead of just going happy. You know, that thing that they did. Very happy. Oh, very happy. What the hell is that? Can we not learn a word or two?
I think that's what we pay. I think it's what we pay the interpreter for, though, isn't it? The Japanese interpreter who's now got more medals than Tavernier, is it? The Rangers Hall of Fame captain
of a pinkish hue could, you know, show a bit of cultural appreciation. Step across.
Yeah, okay. We'll raise that with a club when we can. We'll try and see if Jerry McCulloch can add a bit of Japanese to his repertoire. So Jerry's from the same part of the world as me in Scotland, so I can assure you there's not much Japanese spoken there, but I'm sure he would give it a go.
Surely that's something for Tom Boyd to be picking up, isn't it? You know?
I think Tom Boyd would be better off mastering English first before he attempts any Japanese. So after the game, after all the wholesome scenes, everybody appeared to assemble down the Tron Gate. There's an estimated something like 100,000 people there. Various media reports about what may or may not have happened disorder-wise. But again, this seems to be the type of thing which is, you know, started happening relatively recently. I've seen a load of league titles being won at Celtic Park. Never seen anything like that, though. You know, so many people in that, you know, such a small area. There's always going to be the occasional problem. I just wonder whether the club could do something a little bit more organised next time. Mac, what was your take on those scenes?
Well, it was just beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. You saw the drone footage that people took with the drones flying through the mist of you know, green clouds to around this beautiful city, which we have in Glasgow, and on a great day, and you know, so many people out there just celebrating and enjoying life. I think big picture, it sounded like a lot of them were just enjoying things, and there wasn't, you know, I don't think there was a lot of big problems considering the amount of people assembling in you know, that amount of people assembling in that area. And not only that, but also apparently people were very responsible when it came to making sure the cleanup afterwards was done properly as well. So it wasn't just leaving stuff on the street, but a lot of people getting involved in cleaning up and things afterwards, which is
picking
important
up the
because
bits, maybe.
Not that, yeah, TIFO. I'm a bit, yeah. I think that's not the worst idea to let for people just to let with the TIFO just to have a bit of a, you know, chat about what do we do with this stuff once we're done. But yeah, those are good things, because I think it shows that, you know, we're a club that's classy on all levels. We can celebrate, and then we make sure that the place is back to where it needs to be.
Yeah, there was actually a clean-up organised between the groups that had made the TIFO, actually, the Green Brigade, the North Curve, the boys, and Celtic themselves. A bunch of volunteers were working away there about 9:30 on Saturday night, and they had the place back to its best by about midnight. So something you probably won't read in the press. And I'd be interested, Steve, to see. I mean, there was 10 arrests apparently at the whole thing. I'd be interested to see what would be the normal amount of arrests in that area on a Saturday evening under normal circumstances, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to sound really churlish, but when the Rangers won it in the COVID season, and we were all in lockdown here and there, and they had mass breaking of the lockdown rules and the gathering and whatnot, God knows how many arrests they could have had when they were wrecking George Square and breaking benches and, whatever. And I know I'm falling into the trap of benchmarking us against them. And I said last week, we need to be more than that. We need to benchmark ourselves against higher bars. But I do get cheesed off with how the press portrays some of this stuff. There's just the negative spin on it, and I understand it's disruptive to the city. It's a popular place in the city, and if you're trying to run a small business there or whatever, I can imagine it's disruptive. And I'm with you, Stephen. We as a club, we should be thinking about, let's arrange something on Glasgow Green, or let's put on a bit of entertainment, let's put on stuff with facilities so people aren't peeing in the street or whatever it is. Let's get ahead of this a little bit. But some of the press spin on it, I think is a little bit silly, really. And like you say, that's probably similar to what would normally happen on most Saturday nights in that area anyway. So
yeah, I wouldn't have killed him to put a couple of portaloos out, maybe a few bins, So, Gav, do you think something more organised is the way to go? Because obviously we'll be doing this again next year.
Yeah, that sounds good. I wish we wouldn't talk about portaloos and urinating in the street, because as you know, I like to keep nicely hydrated before we hit record, and I'm usually struggling to contain myself in more ways than one as we do this podcast. Yeah, but I mean, an organized event would be amazing. Yeah, but bring some order to it, because I mean, something to be said for the spontaneity of the way it happens, and this is our city and all of that stuff. So trying to contain that sort of spontaneous expression of joy en masse maybe might it might lose something if it's a bit too organized. If it becomes, a proper contained event, everybody behind these barriers kind of thing, it might lose a bit, but it will certainly be, easier to clean up afterwards. And as you say, might reduce some of the negativity that comes with these spontaneous events out in the open.
Yeah, I'll just bring up this comment from Michael McDonald, which is fairly relevant. Would the police prefer to have everyone contained in one area rather than dotted about the city? Which is a very good point. You keep them all within a sort of half-mile radius there, and it's easier to police. And to be honest with you, it's probably a feather in the cap of the Glasgow police that this passed off relatively peacefully with only 10 arrests. You'd think they would probably be boasting about that, that they can do something like that in the city without any major public disorder. So I think it's much ado about nothing. The only thing was the amount of drones in the sky. It must have been a bit busy up there. I hope there was an air traffic controller preventing any collisions. The sky must have been black with drones.
Speculation as well that one point the drone came too close to one of the people that was on a lamppost, and the person was trying to get them away. And the question is, was it because that person should have been at work at the time? We don't know.
Right. The guy was on a sickie.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right, so we'll move on to what the thing we want to discuss next. A lot of people have been talking about it already in the comments, and it's the rumours that have been circulating probably for about a week now. That Ange is a subject of interest from Tottenham Hotspur to fill their manager's role. Rumours have been gathering pace, and it's even to the point where it's been suggested perhaps that there's already been some talks between Ange and the people at Spurs. Ange himself, as always, is giving nothing away either way. He's not confirming or denying any of this stuff, instead focusing on talking about the game coming up on Saturday only. So we'll start. I might start by asking you guys, and I'll start with you, Mac. What's your degree of nervousness about Ange leaving for Spurs on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being chilled, relaxed, and smoking a joint, and 10 being reaching for the hypertension meds?
I think I'd be somewhere in the middle, probably. There is a bit of concern around it because Tottenham is one of those bigger clubs in the EPL or top six, but and has a large budget to work with. But on the other side, there's still. Yeah, so to be honest, I think it's all up in the air a little bit at the moment. I think we don't really know what will happen with that. But I would say Celtic has a lot of things going for it as a club. His family live in they've shown that they've moved around the world, but they seem to be pretty happy living in Scotland at the moment. They've been here for only a couple of years now. I think we see that it's a community club, which is a beautiful thing. We have these huge amounts of it's one of the biggest clubs in the world, isn't it? Really, and we have a huge amount of support base. So you can play in front of 60,000 people. And to be honest, the other thing I think about Ange is he's achieved anything we could have hoped from him as a coach. There's a lot of stuff going on in the media. There's a lot of media speculation, particularly even within Australia, about that Ange will go to one club or another. They've been talking about it all season that would happen. And it's almost like the media wants to benefit off the fact that Ange has pushed ahead, but Ange has achieved everything he needs to achieve. So I think at the end of the day, he should make his own decision based on where he wants to go from here. I hope it is for Celtic. I think there's still a lot more that he can achieve here, and I think if you and I'm sure that they will look. The biggest thing is I think it's important that if he does wish to stay, that they look after him financially, so that that his family can be well looked after, because I think that's important. That will be not because he wants to make a huge amount of money, but more a decent amount that he can, for the hard work that he's put in.
Yeah, so I'll go to you next, Steve. So I think the argument kind of goes, just to play devil's advocate here, that Spurs are genuinely, potentially a top 6 club in the EPL, a club that was in the Champions League final in 2019, so 4 years ago. I think that the way the argument has been framed is this might be the biggest club that Ange is capable of being offered in the EPL, and for that reason, he would be tempted for that reason alone. Do you think there's any truth in that?
I mean, they are a big club. They've got a decent following. They've got the right infrastructure. They've got a beautiful stadium. There would be a sensible step for Ange to take. Second part of that question, though, or second part of that statement around, is he not really a viable candidate for a top 4 team, for a Liverpool or a Man United or whatever. You do tend to find, they're going for the kind of super coaches these days, typically slightly younger, more in the 40s rather than mid to late 50s. But, who the hell knows? I mean, the thing that really would put me off about Spurs, apart from the fact that we're losing our manager, and everyone knows I'm a big Ange fan. You just look at, the Daniel Levy factor and is he really going to get the free rein that he's been given at Celtic, where he doesn't do everything. I mean, people get a bit confused, and we'll talk about director of football maybe in a moment. It's not that Ange does everything, but it's that he's got a hand in it all, and it gets done the way he wants it to be done. So he's very meticulous about that kind of stuff, and I just can't see that happening at a Spurs. But equally, I can't see it happening at probably any of the top half EPL sides because, frankly, their size of operation is such that it can't be really, single individual oversight. So. Yeah, I mean, I think Spurs would be a viable option. I think Ange is all about personal relationships. If you look at the way he's navigated his career to date, I think he would be looking carefully at the number of Spurs managers that have been turned over the last, couple of years, and the common recurring theme of why that is, and the fractious relationship with Daniel Levy. And I think that would weigh heavily on him, or it'd certainly be a big factor in his consideration. And I must admit, I'm not sure I would necessarily see him, going to a bigger club in the EPL. I think, I just don't think he would fit the criteria for a Man U or a Liverpool, or an Arsenal. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Steve. I don't think any of the top clubs in England give that sort of control to their manager. As you say, the operations are just too big. So I'll go to you next, Gav. It's important, I think, for Ange particularly to have a look at the fact that 50% of the clubs in the EPL have sacked their manager this year over the course of the season, and out of that 50%, 3 of them have sacked their manager twice. One of them being Spurs. So for me, I think although this is attractive to Ange, and I'm not convinced he wouldn't take it if he was offered it, should he be concerned that he might be out of a job in 6 months, basically?
Well, that's one of the many factors that he has to think about if he's truly addressing this decision in his mind. On your earlier question of the stressometer, having said I like to avoid anxiety, I'm sort of, the pendulum is flapping around between about 6 and 9 for me, depending on the latest source of information that I consume, because there are very persuasive arguments that can be made either way. There's a ton of reasons why he should totally take the Spurs job. There's a ton of reasons why he should stay the hell away and carry on at Celtic. So I suppose on that basis, it's, as you say, unconvinced. I'm not certain what he's going to do, of course. I don't know if it's entirely all up in the air. I think if he's decided to stay at Celtic, and that's possibly what the meetings were about recently, those mysterious photographs, and it's going to be announced at some stage, and he's remaining tight-lipped as he always does. He just wants to enjoy the moment. Maybe that's all been settled and we just don't know about it. Little patsies like us who talk about it 24 hours a day, we're the ones who are going to find out in due course that, the decision was made some time ago. If he is ultimately going to go, perhaps it's still all up in the air, and maybe he needs to hear what he needs to hear from Daniel Levy. So I just have no idea. I've been to Tottenham loads of times. I know lots of Spurs fans. I love it when they tell me that they don't want him anywhere near their club. I'm like, yes, that's exactly correct. I have a Rangers fan who was sending me all these links to Tottenham fans talking about, this, all those horrible things that they say about he's achieved nothing and he's, a kebab chef or whatever the talk was. Lots of people have vested interests in him going as well. Mm-hmm. That's obviously a factor. But it's not just the Scottish press talking about it. I've been on more Tottenham fan sites this week than ever in my life to see what the hell they're saying about him, and hoping it's all negative and they've heard someone who says there's nothing in it. It's definitely going to be Rodgers or somebody else. So yeah, I don't know. It just depends what I read. But even talking about it now, I get a sick feeling in my stomach that there's a possibility that, our daddy might leave us. And I don't want that.
Well, nobody wants that, Gav. Yeah, I think, Mike, I'm like you, Gav. I'm a little bit more concerned, and I get more concerned the more I hear about this. And what's at the source of my concern is really the type of people who are reporting this. It's not Keith Jackson at the Daily Record that's pushing this. You've got guys like Miguel Delaney, who is a fairly prominent English football journalist, who's reporting that talks have already taken place. So when guys like that are starting to say this, then I think there's something happening. Now, whether or not it'll come to anything, whether or not he'll actually be offered the job, or whether or not it's just all talk at the moment, or whether he'd even accept it, then remains to be seen. But I think there's mileage in this for sure. But I think what I wanted to touch on was that in the event that Ange leaves Celtic, what does the club look like? I'll start with you, Steve. What does the club look like post-Ange in terms of, one, who gets the job next, and two, what is the structure? Do we stay with an Ange-type figure who controls everything, or should we go back to the fabled director of football model which we've heard so much about over the past few years?
Yeah, what does it look like? To me, it looks fairly bleak, frankly, because I'm not sure we've necessarily built the infrastructure around Ange, so when we talk about businesses and the maturity of businesses, the first level of maturity is chaos, and no one really has any direction or whatever. And then you get the second level of maturity, and that's where you're person dependent and you're very heavily dependent on one or two key people in a business, and they're the heroes and they carry the whole business through. And the next level of maturity is where you build the infrastructure around those people, and you become less person dependent and you're more process dependent, because you've got good scouting in our context, for a football club, or you've got a really good player trading model, or you've got a very clear strategy around how you're going to trade your way to the next aspiration of being a pot 3 club, or whatever it is. I don't think we've necessarily done that. I mean, Michael Nicholson seems like a decent CEO. We had that odd period where we had that other CEO for felt like a couple of days. Mackay was
the fabled Dom Mackay, yeah.
I think Ange has brought in certain new scouts, to scout certain geographies, but it still feels like we're still in that kind of hero mode of, that scout's really good, rather than necessarily laying out the infrastructure, that we're actually scouting new geographies. We're just leaning on more heroes, so I do worry, I mean, I know Gav's worried about me worrying, but I do worry. I do wonder how sustainable this is. And, as listeners or viewers will note, I'm not one for thinking this is a whole generation of Celtic domination for the next 30 years. These things have cycles, and normally the cycle is triggered by, something external, whether it's Rangers, spending money they didn't have, to to get domination locally, or whether it's us bringing in a Brendan Rodgers or a Martin O'Neill, or losing an Ange. It could be that kind of change that could trigger, quite a significant change. Now, that's not to say it's not fixable. Whether it's fixable between now and, if we lost him in the close season, that would be dramatic. But to my mind, I think we need to have, if he's still here for next season, we need to be looking at it a little bit more systemically and thinking about how can we make our club a bit more resilient, such that, we're not on our knees if Ange goes, and whether that's director of football, whether that's, other measures we could take. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But it feels like we need to do something.
Yeah, as definitely as a concern that we haven't put the structures in place that we spoke about, because all the talk pre-Ange, post the Neil Lennon era was that we were going to go with a director of football and possibly a younger first team coach. The name of Enzo Maresca was named, the guy who's back at Man City now after a very unsuccessful spell at Parma, Fergal Harkins was the guy mentioned for director of football, who's actually now director of football at Standard Liège. So that was pretty much the model. Everyone was pretty convinced we were going to go down that road, but we didn't. We went for Ange, and it's been very, very successful. So I'll go to you next, Mac. What's your take on it? Do you think we should be recruiting internally? Is there a possibility that Ange's replacement is already in the building, in terms of perhaps John Kennedy, who Ange was talking up big time last week, or maybe Harry Kewell, who Ange's got a little bit of history with?
I think you'd have to look at. I think that with Kennedy, he's obviously been doing a good job, and if you look at his history of what he's done so far, it's looking good as an assistant coach. But I think that they need to have a bit of, at the end of the day, they're going to have to look at what do they really feel like his performance has been within the club. It's one thing for Ange to compliment him, and probably, and from what we can tell, Ange doesn't give out compliments easily, so it's well deserved. But at the end of the day, the things that I would put forward is, one, I think we have a concept of what kind of football we want to see Celtic play, which is attacking based football with a bit of style and quality to it, and high press, which allows us to do that attacking based football. So if we have a style of football that we want to play, I think it's really important to continue down that path that we are doing. So whether it's John, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced on John Kennedy, actually. I really think you've got to make your decision really dispassionately and look at who is around the world is playing that kind of football. You really need, in a club to do well, you need your manager to have a really good intellect. They need to be a really smart character that has ideas about how they want to play the game and how they want to move it forward. But we want people that are aligned with the play that we want to do. So when we make that recruitment, we need to have a coach that's smart, but also plays the way we want to play. The advantage of doing that is that it will continue, that style of play will continue to progress through to the next generation of players and the next generation of players, and it becomes very synonymous with your team. Whereas if you chop, and it has to change with football. So there might be times when attacking football is the way to go. There may come a time in, where the game has changed and that's no longer the best way to win. But I think at this stage it can still be done, and we've seen it, a number of teams do it. And so I think those are important. The other thing I would just say briefly about the director of football is we need to be clear about what the role of that director of football would be. For me, looking at it, it would seem to be that the director of football is someone that looks at the long-term planning for the club. And I would also make sure that the director of football, one thing that concerns me about having a director of football is you don't want there to be a conflict between, or who between the manager and the director of football over who is in charge. I think it's really important that you select an intelligent manager to be in the role. And I think probably for me, I think having the manager being in charge of the director of football and directing on which direction we want to, what they want to go forward. But you select the manager to play the style of football that the club wants to play. And I think if you can the other area where you can get into trouble is if, say, the board or owner or CEO were talking with the director of football and not with the manager and directing in the wrong way. I think the manager would feel quite upset about that. So, because one thing we can see is, especially if you get a good manager like Ange, they can make all kinds of advantages to the club. And I would be somewhere in the middle. I think there have been changes made during Ange's time that have already starting to bear fruit. I think the recruitment seems to be really, really strong, and they're bringing in new people in that area. So there's some things, infrastructure that's already starting to be set in place, but I think we need to continue moving forward. We want to be a club that's competitive in Europe, so we need to do that.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. That there are many arguments for and against the director of football, and it would be a particular type of manager who would be able to work with a certain type of director of football. The argument being it needs to be a kind of more of a junior, perhaps younger manager. John Kennedy would obviously be the continuity candidate, but I just feel as if John Kennedy's just been indelibly stained by the Neil Lennon era. When he took over as interim after the Neil Lennon disaster after he left, and the season just spiralled out of control. So I'm not sure the Celtic fans are ready for John Kennedy, unless, of course, there was a very experienced director of football brought in over his head. But I'll go to you next, Gav. There's been a lot of bit of talk in the comments section here as well about your fellow Ulsterman, Brendan Rodgers, who's currently without a club. Would you welcome Rodgers back to the club?
I mean, I don't have a problem with Rodgers to the same extent that some do. But, I just don't think going back is a great idea, generally speaking. You talk about Kennedy being the continuity candidate. Continuity is, I think, something that we would all welcome. Someone who plays a similar style and has a similar philosophy to Ange. Now, whether there's somebody in the club that's already steeped in that sufficiently and is big enough to take on the role, I don't know. Or can we go find somebody else who could do that? Maybe another name, an up-and-coming manager who can work with the director of football. That's probably for the best to get all the infrastructure in place, as Steve was talking about earlier. But yeah, Rodgers is yesterday's man. Brought us tons of trophies, and then did a runner, to reference Philip Schofield again. Delighted to seen all that success under Rodgers. But yeah, he's a past manager of Celtic, not a future one.
Yeah, recently bought a house in Bearsden apparently, and has been quoted off the record as saying he has unfinished business at Celtic. So watch this space. I'm making no comment either way. Steve, I'll put one last point here about Ange. So let's be more positive about this one. So Ange is staying. Okay. All right. Now, if, for instance, Ange says, look, I'm staying, I want another crack at the Champions League, we'll reassess in a year's time. We're just about to go into a transfer window where most of us are expecting Celtic to spend some significant money. Should we be holding back on that if Ange is not going to commit to the club for like another 2 or 3 years?
No, I don't think you can. I don't think you can kind of half commit to these things. You kind of need to, double down, don't back down. No, I mean, I think, if Ange says he's here for another season, we back him fully, and we know that we've got revenue streams that are sustainable, that are going to give us, touches wood, similar spend capacity next season or next close season. So if he does go at the end of 23, 24, the incoming manager is going to have budget to spend. It's not like we need to hold back spend in case that's going to happen. I think, thinking about it, when Brendan Rodgers was kind of his last transfer window, I think the club didn't really back him because, there was friction between him and the hierarchy, and clearly that wasn't a good situation. We created a pretty messy space for it. So no, I think we back him, and if at the end of the day, frankly, if, to Gav's point earlier on, it depends how you do these things. If he goes at the end of 23, 24 and he's given a good crack and, come what outcomes there are for 23, 24, we might win the league, we might do better in Europe. But even if we don't, my gut feel would say if he goes after 3 seasons, I think a lot of Celtic fans would look back on it favourably and say, be thankful for what we had rather than necessarily, curse him for not staying for a 4th season. The issue, without retreading old ground, the issue with Brendan Rodgers was, he jumped, did the midnight flip, tried to take the whole backroom staff with him. He did not do it in a respectful manner, and frankly, it was all about Brendan. It wasn't about, what he was leaving behind in terms of the football club or the community that we've just talked about, or, the team or whatever. It was very much a, see ya, I don't know. So no, to answer your question, no, if Ange commits to next season, then we should commit to him as well. So we should commit to the spend as well.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, let's hope he stays, and let's hope that Dermot Desmond was over giving him a big fat 5-year contract with and a huge check to spend in the transfer market, because I think Ange has shown that he deserves that sort of commitment from the club. But I would like to see him signing some sort of more long-term contract rather than just the 1-year rolling contract he's on just now. Now, that can include a release clause if a certain club comes in for him. But I would like to see him on a contract, and with some safeguards for the club built in, where we get a decent compensation package if he does decide to go next year. Because at the moment, we're looking at something like a £2 million compensation if he were to go to Spurs or a club like that. So let's hope it's all positive. And after the cup final, this time next week, on next week's Tuesday Crew, we'll be celebrating the fact that Ange has committed himself to the next 3 or 4 years at the club.
That's right. My stressometer has gone down to 3 at that very thought. Thank you.
Good, mate. I'm glad to hear it. I like to be of service. So yeah, moving on to probably the last time we'll talk about tonight, the Celtic Women's Cup final victory over Rangers on the weekend, on Sunday, the day after the title party, making it a fantastic weekend for everyone in the Celtic family, in a game that threw up some really funny moments, particularly one including the angriest looking woman I've ever seen in my life, who's the captain of the Huns. And I can only compare her to the woman who used to serve me my school dinner. She was equally as scary as that. And then she put barging into the back of a Celtic player and then storming off, chewing a wasp, apparently. And then going up for us runners-up medal with her face like an arse. And then instantly wrenching it off and storming away in the huff. So hilarious, and so much in keeping with the rest of that club, Mac. What do you think? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that. I did see that. Yeah, look, it's not great. I understand what the message that she probably wanted to put to people was, we're not happy with being second team or whatever, but you don't need to push people over on like the way that she did too. It was a shoulder budge from behind, unnecessary moment. And I think it is there are probably some concerns within, at least within that team, that they had the incident with the assistant manager, and now this. There seems to be a pretty angry culture growing there, which isn't ideal. But looking at the game, it was fantastic. Our women's team playing some really good football under Fran Alonso, and some of the great players there. Just starting to really hit their stride. So would love to see. I think it's actually a real possible growth area for the club. I think it's a really good. It's a bit of a business opportunity, really, because if you can start to bring in whole families of people into the Celtic community and make it an enjoyable time for them, women, children, the family, especially young people coming into young women interested in sport and just enjoying these days, the advantages for our club will be huge, just in terms of long-term fans for the club. You can look at it from a purely financial perspective, but so merchandise and those sort of advantages, but just in terms of our community benefits are huge. So I think it's a really good opportunity for the club. I think you'll touch on in a moment just whether we should financially put more money towards it. I would. I think we need to be matching the other top clubs in the league at a minimum. So we should be making sure that we have the same sort of financial resources that Rangers and Glasgow City do, because we don't want to be left behind. Women's games continuing to grow and becoming more popular worldwide. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, Steve, there was a nice story came out of the game that one of the Celtic players, Amy Gallagher, was a great granddaughter of the great Patsy Gallagher. And they won a Scottish Cup medal almost exactly 100 years apart. Patsy winning a cup final medal when Celtic defeated Clyde in 1923. Now, I feel as if that sort of story is something Celtic should have been pushing before the game. And I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know Amy Gallagher was Patsy Gallagher's great granddaughter. And I feel as if, just going to something Max said there about I'm not sure Celtic have invested enough in the women's team, particularly due to the reports this week that we're lagging way behind Rangers and Glasgow City. So do you think the club should be doing more?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I can sort of understand why they didn't leading up to the game, because that might have been a bit presumptuous, or, it could be, given the Rangers backroom team something to pin up on their dressing room wall or whatever, so you don't necessarily need to build that up before the game, but certainly after the game, why wouldn't we be pointing to that? That's a phenomenal story. I didn't realize it either. It was shared on our group chat earlier on, and I think most of us probably didn't know that story at all. So it's clearly got very little coverage. But the thing that struck me, I don't watch a lot of women's football, I'll be open, but I did watch the weekend's game. But there's a hell of a lot of characters in that Celtic women's team. Some really strong characters, some good footballers as well, obviously, but, really strong characters as well. And I actually didn't even think the funniest moment was the Rangers captain, her staunch face when she went up for a medal. I didn't even think that was the funniest moment. I thought the funniest moment was when Olivia Ferguson came on as a substitute quite late on. And she runs up to, I can't think of the Rangers player now, and she just gives her this massive grin, and she's just smiling away. And they clearly know each other fairly well, but I think we should put a little link to it in the show notes, because it is the funniest thing. Honestly, I've been sharing it very widely since I've seen it earlier on today. But no, going back to your point, yeah, it's a phenomenal story. 100 years apart, great granddaughter, carrying on the legacy. That's the stuff of kind of almost, fairy tale legends type stuff. Why wouldn't we be making more of that? And I kind of think the club might be missing a trick if they don't. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel as if Liv Ferguson's smile is going to be memed for years to come. In much the same way some of the stuff Scott Brown's done has been memed to this day, long after she's left the club.
What I want to see, and I can't do it because I'm not clearly not the tech genius on this pod, but what I want to see is her smiling like that, and then the cut to Ange, when he does that eyebrow reaction for CCB.
Yeah, someone's already done that. Someone's put those together. Yeah.
Oh, send me that link, Gav.
That can be your homework, Gav, to find us that link and circulate it. So, Gav, there was a story from one of our regular contributors, Kaiser, who posted on his Twitter that Celtic are planning to build a 5,000-seater stadium at the old Barrafield complex, the Barrafield site, which is the old training ground, which will be used by the Celtic women's team and the Celtic B team. So I think that would be a positive step forward, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and the response to that among many was, 5,000 is not enough. A knee-jerk reaction to the recent attendance figures. But of course, they were hugely inflated by the publicity stunt, if you like, of the Celtic end, swelling those stats. I very much doubt all those fans who were jumping about in the Celtic end are going to be turning up on a wet Wednesday to watch Celtic women in the middle of next season. So most of the games will be played at this new stadium. That's the idea, with a few at Celtic Park. If that's all true, that's all good stuff. You got to invest in these things. Celtic's a family club. And Patsy Gallagher's son, Willie, played for the club, didn't he? And now this is his great-granddaughter. Mm-hmm. So regardless of gender, you can live your family's dreams and turn out for the club who your whole family has supported down the generations. Mm-hmm. So yeah, get right behind the women's game.
And Fran Alonso, the manager, I don't know if you've seen his post-match interview. That's another one that will go down in the legend category.
I don't think the Celtic fans sing lo 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 or whatever the hell he did. It's more just a right?
Yeah, you're right, but I think if we have another dead rubber game against Rangers next year, where we've won the league, I think we should let him manage the team just for one game. Just for the crack. I think that would be epic.
Can you imagine, if the Rangers sack Mickey Beale, and they put up the bat signal for Graham Murty again, and just by chance it's Fran Alonso in one dugout against Graham Murty in the other. Can you imagine the antics? It would be worth the entrance price on itself in its own.
Yeah, it'd definitely be worth watching. So yeah, well,
we'll just wrap it up, I think, Stephen.
Yep, we're just about out of time. So just quickly, Gav, we've got the Scottish Cup final on the weekend. What's your score prediction?
4-0
to Celtic.
Come on, Inverness, Caledonian Thistle.
And Mac, what's your score prediction?
It's the question is whether you go down or up. I think maybe 5-0. Let's go for it. But
let's be positive.
Yeah. Who knows? I know that the biggest thing is we come out to play. Let's play our best and see how it go.
And let's hope nobody on this pod says no disrespect to Inverness Caledonian Thistle, because I'm sick hearing those words.
Yeah. So maximum disrespect to Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Steve,
I didn't say that.
Steve, what's your they're absolutely pish. Steve, what's your score prediction?
I'll say 3-0, and I'm going to be bullish and say that we'll get a Greg Taylor goal from outside the box to kick us off, and then
precise.
Yeah. Oh, hang on, we're getting more precise as we go on. Then a Rio Hatate goal, similarly from outside the box, and then we'll get Gav's favourite player, coming off the bench to finish off this scoring. There you go.
Yeah, well, you guys have picked all the good scores, so I'm going to have to go 6-0 because I have to go up the way. I'm going to say Kyogo's going to score a hat trick, and we'll dance our way into the night with our 8th treble, which will be a new world record. Again, something you won't have read much about in the media this week. So, fantastic achievement and something that the club should be absolutely recognised for. So thanks very much, guys, for joining me tonight. And thanks to everyone who joined us in the comments. Very much appreciated. And all that remains for me is to say hail, hail, and God bless.
Hail,
All
hail.
right. Cheers, everyone.